Hi Gillian, how's it going?
It's going fine, thanks very much.
Good. I got you on here because you wrote a blog recently talking about further education and some of the controversy surrounding the numbers regarding the SNP in college places. Would you like to explain?
Yeah, this is something that had been bothering me for a while. Quite a lot of leaflets through from the main UK parties demonising the SNP and just saying the headline, college places slashed. And I thought, well, that's a little bit disingenuous. In fact, it's extremely disingenuous because what it made it look like that there wasn't enough college places for anyone and that they were just being cut across the board. But I come from the perspective of somebody that's worked in further education for the last 14 years. And to say college cut slashed just doesn't tell the full story. What in fact actually happened was that 2001 would be when I started working in our local college. And at that point, their funding was based on full-time courses, but also an awful lot of part-time courses. And a lot of these part-time courses were one-off sessions where a group of people would come in for an afternoon and be taught a small course on whatever the department could think of.
Hmm.
And that really was as kind of random as, I mean, it felt random to me because I was being asked to come up with ideas and to teach them. And I worked in a large department which was communication, media, and I taught television production, but I would have to turn my hand to a lot of different things. The way that the college was funded was per student, you would get a portion of money called a sum. And because of the then Labour administration in the Scots Parliament had an insistence on this education for all, certain demographic of students coming in would be liable to have a weighted sum, i.e., more money. So, for example, maybe people over 60 or people from various demographics, they wanted to encourage into education, which is all well and good. However, what colleges did and what college I worked for was like trying to think of how many people they could get in to get as much funding as possible. And it actually came to the point where we were competing against other institutions like, libraries and the sort of places that would do like little interest courses for people, particularly, in my experience, pensioners.
Hmm.
Really at the expense of teaching my full-time students who would be on HNC and HND courses targeted towards getting them into work. I would have my preparation time sometimes completely obliterated having to come up with these little short courses which Thursday then we've got a group of people coming in, we've got 24 people coming in and they want to know something on the media. Gillian, can you do something? So I would have to come up with something from scratch for people that I would never see again
Hmm.
and who would not get a qualification which would enable them to go into work. So, of course, we had a situation when the SNP government came in where dealing with the funding that they had for colleges, and I'm not saying what they did was perfect, but they had to prioritise where to target that funding. And they decided to target that funding in full-time vocational courses. And then all these little courses, they were dropped.
So, in essence, a lot of these small courses that were useful but not in the same way that a full-time course, they were dropped, but full-time proper courses with a qualification were instigated, and then those numbers were used to sort of say that the SNP's cut all these places in education. Is
Yes,
that what happened?
yes, you weren't actually looking at a type of course. And I am not saying that education for all is a bad idea. In an ideal world, the college would open up its doors, it would have loads of teaching staff to be able to teach a range of different courses. But the fact of the matter was, all these little short courses, it didn't mean that the college actually recruited more staff to teach them. It meant that the burden was put on the existing staff to come up with. I mean, I now remember sitting in meetings at our department where we were all being asked, "Can you think of something? Can you think of something we can teach? Can you think of groups that we could target to come in and do these short courses because they were heavily funded?" And sometimes I really felt that our focus just wasn't on the right kind of thing. And it was actually one other thing from the perspective of somebody working in the college. It's very stressful. It's very stressful to go into a classroom with people, students that you've never met, invest that energy and time in something that you're never going to teach again. With things like radio journalism in 4 hours. It's absolutely ridiculous, you know?
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that people didn't get something out of it, and I'm not saying that I didn't put lots of effort into them. To be quite honest, I probably put a hell of a lot of effort in it. but it didn't really have much in the way of return. You know, these were not people that you made a connection with, and they certainly were not people that would then go on to become a radio journalist or would then go on to become one of our full-time students. And I think that the way that this whole hyperbole around college places slashed means that people are not able to get into college. And that's just not the case. Anybody who wants to go to college to do an HNC or a national certificate can usually get a place. That's the case. And I'm not saying that the FE is perfect. It is far from perfect. There have been problems with, a lot of people have had to take voluntary severance. Teaching staff. There's not enough teaching staff in my college, to my mind. But on this single issue, this single headline, college places slashed, I really just felt so strongly that someone, from the perspective of having worked in FE across two administrations, has to set the record straight.
And thanks for doing it. It's very important, I think. But what do you see as the larger issues surrounding further and higher education with regards to this election? Obviously fees is one thing, but is that what you see as the largest issue?
I think it is. It's so fundamental to what we're about in Scotland is having free higher and further education, and it's something that absolutely has to be protected. And it's one of those things that if we don't protect it and have it top of our agenda, it could be taken away from us. And it would have such an effect on our long-term effect in our society. I mean, you can see it's happening in England and Wales, where only a certain I hate the word class, but a certain class of people can afford to go into education. And if you are not from a wealthy family, the debt that you're going to incur before you even start earning any money is horrific. I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have a degree right now if I was in that situation. My family wouldn't have been able to afford £9,000 a year in fees. So I think that that's the number one thing that we are consistently talking about, and it has to stay top of the agenda.
And how difficult do you think it will be for the SNP to maintain no fees, given the austerity agenda of the two main parties in England?
I think everything's always difficult to do, but it's a case of priorities. And that comes back to what I'm saying about further education. There's always going to be people that are going to use it as a political football and say, but you did this. But in fact, what it is prioritising what's important in our society and channeling the money into that as far as you can. There are certain things that are going to have to suffer as a result, but it's a case of prioritising, and I think free education is just far too important not to prioritise it, because the knock-on effect that has in our society as a whole is massive.
Okay, thanks for coming on, Gillian.
Pleasure.
First Minister's Questions. Always a bonanza for the terminological inexactitude hunter. Holyrood may not be able to emulate Westminster's cacophony of braying, harumphing and honking brought to you by puffed-up, testosterone-filled sociopaths, but if you're after sanctimonious guff, fake outrage and hilarious stairhead rammies, FMQs is the very dab, even if afterwards your ears feel as if they've been massaged with rusty cheese graters. At least you get some giggles along the way. The cause célèbre today was SNP candidate Paco McSheepy, or rather his disappointingly humdrum alter ego, Neil Hay. If you read the Scottish Daily Mail, he's a vile cybernat troll who'd benefit from a good tasering. If you read Wings Over Scotland, he's just an ordinary bloke who occasionally used to retweet satire and express his own views clumsily. If you read both the Mail and Wings, seek professional help immediately. Anyway, Mr. Hay had apologised, so he was obviously guilty of something. Sack him, demanded Kezia Dugdale, even though with postal voting already underway, this would create chaos. Let the voters decide, snapped back Nicola Sturgeon, confronting Labour with its worst nightmare. I've got a feeling the voters may decide the whole thing is a bum rap, but as I've also placed a bet on Jeremy Clarkson opening a charm school before 2020, you're entitled to have a few reservations about my judgment. The real big lie, not of the day but of the past 3 years, is the implication, snidely whispered by much of the press, that it's always people on the pro-indie side who are doing the trolling and abusing, and never the pure-hearted unionists. That was why it was so gratifying to see Nicola follow up with a haymaker. "Will Kezia Dugdale take action on Ian Smart?" she asked, naming the high-profile Labour-supporting lawyer, much feted in fantouche BBC Scotland circles, who regularly regales his Twitter followers with descriptions of the SNP as fascist scum. Poor Kezia looked totally discombobulated, as if a mongrel had just chewed up her favourite Barbie doll. Well and truly telled. It was blatant whataboutery from Nicola, of course, but sometimes, at the risk of sounding like David Cameron, it's the right thing to do.